your neighborhood. I'm really pleased to be here at an SCCA meeting, if for nothing else, to have my image of the organization so deeply reaffirmed. When I think of the SCCA, I basically picture Dan flying around in a Harry Potter outfit eating Rocky Road ice cream. And I don't see you as people who want to be invisible. So everything I thought of you has basically already been deliciously affirmed. I'm very lucky and grateful to be back on the land of the Sechelt Nation. And I had an extraordinary meeting yesterday where I want to start by sharing it with you. It was my first in-person meeting, an outdoor, socially distanced and mostly masked encounter with an extraordinary guy named Shane Jackson. Do you folks know Shane? Shane runs Spirit Works, which is a really cool business in Sechelt. He was an Aboriginal law expert and lawyer advising many nations, especially the Sechelt Nation, and over many years as a lawyer. And he gave it up to become a traditional artist and start this beautiful business that employs half a dozen Sechelt Nation youth and makes traditional crafts. And we had been trying to, we have mutual friends, been trying to find each other. We met on the beach and sat by the ocean for a couple of hours and just exchanged and connected. And it was such a deep reminder for me, first of all, of our need for connection in this time when we're stuck in these boxes in front of these other boxes and reaching out through the screens to try to touch each other. And it was such a joy and a pleasure to be able to meet in person. He's been vaccinated at least at once, and I hope to get my text soon. I hope many of you have had your vaccinations, or at least your turn is coming up. So Shane and I sat down and talked because we've been following each other's work for a while. And we immediately started talking about interconnectedness. And we explored our own interconnectedness in the way that we've come to the kind of work that we do. The cut line for the LEAP manifesto, which we released with a huge spectrum of different people and different organizations through different kinds of social movements across a huge range of issues 6 years ago in 2015. The tagline was of a Canada based on caring for the earth and one another. And it was a call for urgent and dramatic action to save everything and everyone, because we know that the climate crisis in particular is at a very perilous point. And yet at the same time, there is a surfacing, an understanding, a deepening understanding among people everywhere that the way our system works is broken. It doesn't serve all humans. It certainly doesn't serve all living things. And it is suffocating the planet on which we depend. And the LEAP was not a grim document, though. It was a very hopeful expression of the kind of world that we could build if we got busy in a hurry. But it was based on this idea that we are connected, that there is nothing that is not connected. And that's a lesson of the biosphere. That's a lesson from Mother Earth that we all know. And it was no coincidence that the LEAP manifesto was deeply influenced by the three generations and many different Indigenous leaders who were present at its founding, the meetings that led up to it, and the writing of the document itself. There was not just an Indigenous, informed by Indigenous knowledge, the document, but infused with an Indigenous worldview of interconnection and of our inseparability from each other and from the earth. And so Shane and I talked excitedly about the work that we've both been doing and the common themes that thread through it. And what a threat to business as usual, that very idea that we are all connected, that our fates are interconnected, that we rely on each other, that we need each other, and that we're connected to each other. That basic idea, that fundamental idea, the basis of your work, of my work, of Shane's work, that is a threat to the business as usual, to the forces that are gutting the forests, to the forces that are clogging the streams and destroying the watersheds. And so it's a powerful idea. It's not an angry idea. It's a healing idea. It's a nurturing idea, but it's a powerful idea. And I was struck thinking about this in the past week because, hello, this was 10 days ago that a hummingbird stopped a pipeline in its tracks. How about that? Oh my goodness, a hummingbird. We have been fighting for years against these toxic tar sands pipelines. And we've had many victories. Many of them haven't been built. And the Trans Mountain Express expansion is proceeding now. And it's devastating. But the fight goes on, and we've seen extraordinary coalitions of indigenous leadership and environmental groups and people in communities across the Lower Mainland coming together and fighting this pipeline. And we haven't stopped it yet. I believe we will. But last week, a hummingbird stopped it when they discovered the Anna's hummingbird nests on the pipeline route in the construction zone, in fact. And there was a beautiful quote from Judy Wilson of the Union of BC Indian Chiefs that I just want to read you that I thought was so profound in terms of our interconnection and the forces that can win these epic battles for survival and for the right of everyone to thrive on this planet. She said, "It's very symbolic that a tiny hummingbird has stopped local construction of this pipeline. At the same time, it's not entirely surprising. Many stories honor the qualities of hummingbird. And one that stands out in particular is hummingbird's tenacious loyalty to the forest. Even as the forest burned and all the other animals fled, hummingbird carried drops of water in their tiny beak from the river to the forest fire. In response to other animals, hummingbird said, 'I'm doing what I can.'" And this is how I see the work that you do in concert and interconnection with many other groups on the Sunshine Coast, doing what we can to stop the fires. And the fires are for real. I don't think there's anyone in this Zoom meeting today who doesn't remember less than a decade ago when there was no such thing as smoke season. And now every spring, I think you must do it too. I love the April summer. Who doesn't want to suddenly have a burst of summer in the spring? But I'm terrified that there hasn't been enough rain and that we're going to see apocalyptic fires and the smoke fill the skies once again. You know, I first came to the Sunshine Coast 26 years ago. I was married in Roberts Creek to my partner in all things, Naomi Klein, in the Klein family house in Roberts Creek in their front yard. And I love this place like nowhere else on earth. My son was born in the Seashell Hospital almost 9 years ago, our son Toma, and we made our connection here, and we've chosen to come back as we have been back and forth over the last 15 years to make our stand here, to throw down here. I remember our wedding, obviously, very well. Yvonne made the most extraordinary food. We put most of our friends at the Creekside Gardens, mostly so my mom and I could get close to the rhododendrons there, which are just like a cornucopia of blossoms every spring. And of course, we had a Doors cover band because in 1997, that's all we could find. So I want to start with gratitude to you for protecting this place, for the gargantuan task of protecting biodiversity in like a natural resource district of 1 million hectares, an impossibly large swath of land for a small group of people to take on responsibility for in concert with others. And so, no, I'm not surprised that no one in the poll wants to be invisible. That is not the nature of who you are and what you do. And the struggles that you have been most successful at and where you've been most needed have been struggles over water. And that is not a coincidence, because water is the source of life that connects us all. And you know it. And that's why you go to the wall for it time after time. It is the watersheds. And soon, as Suzanne was saying, the very exciting but also perilous prospect that groundwater is actually as important as watersheds and melt in terms of our water supplies, where we have to draw an indelible line. And so your work in protecting the water here is sacred work, and I've benefited from it every time I've had a glass of water here on the Sunshine Coast. So huge gratitude for what you do. I want to think a little bit with you just in a few minutes about the kind of struggles that we're in, the prospects for winning a better world, which I believe are eminently possible, imminently too. And I think we're closer to a kind of mass consciousness of the kind of world that we need, a healthier and more sustainable world than we've ever been, even as we come close to midnight on the climate clock, on the species extinction clock, on the scarcity clock for water and all other natural resources. And I want to start by thinking about the kinds of struggles that we've been engaged in. I went around the world in 2010 to 2015, making a film called This Changes Everything, documenting community struggles around the world on the front lines of the climate crisis and fossil fuel extraction. And saw many exciting victories in India, in China, in Indian country, across Turtle Island, in Europe and other places. But a lot of these struggles and a lot of the struggles that you fight are struggles to stop bad things from happening. And we need that. They're what I call the no struggles. We need them. People get angry when precious things are threatened, and that's a mobilizing force, that's an organizing force. And so we need no struggles to build the movements that we need to have the power to win, to elect politicians who are accountable to us, to our communities, and who continue to feel that way once they've won and gone on to Victoria or Ottawa or wherever politicians go when we never see them again. We need no struggles. They're organizing moments. They're vital struggles. But we also need yeses. We also need proposals. We need to invoke and to summon and to dream together the visions of the world that we're fighting for. We need that because we have to inspire people. We have to orient them in the struggle. We have to excite people with hope and not just charge up the adrenaline with the need to protect and to stop devastation. And so I've spent a lot of time over the last decade, as I've been more and more engaged with the climate crisis, thinking and telling stories and researching and visiting and documenting people who are putting forward proposals for better ways to live. The LEAP Manifesto was one version of that. I just want to read you to orient us in this conversation in the kinds of things that we are fighting for, in the interconnection of struggles as the biospheres are interconnected, in the kind of world that we put forward that we think is within our grasp. The LEAP Manifesto starts with a paragraph about the crises we face, which is the world that we're starting from. And then it goes on to say this: we could live in a country powered entirely by renewable energy, woven together by accessible public transit, in which the jobs and opportunities of this transition are designed to systematically eliminate racial and gender inequality. Caring for one another and caring for the planet could be the economy's fastest growing sectors. Many more people could have higher wage jobs with fewer work hours, leaving us ample time to enjoy our loved ones and flourish in our communities. We know that the time for this great transition is short. Climate scientists have told us that this is the decade to take decisive action to prevent catastrophic global warming. That means small steps will no longer get us where we need to go. It is time to leap. And that was the vision that we put forward in 2015 in the middle of a federal election, a big coalition of environmental groups and indigenous leaders, of trade unions, of migrant rights activists and housing rights activists. And no, we haven't won it yet, but we've seen a blossoming of the very creative solutions-oriented activism in the last decade. And I've seen it around the world where I've done journalism, and I've been part of trying to stimulate it here at home where I live and work. And we've seen it most dramatically in just the past few years with the emergence of these three powerful words: Green New Deal, evoking FDR's New Deal of the 1930s in the United States, a response to the catastrophic environmental situation of the Dust Bowl, as well as the Great Depression, and this vast wartime style mobilization of a federal government next door to us to put people back to work, in many cases, healing the land. The Civilian Conservation Corps put 2 million young people in the Depression era time to work on the government payroll, planting 2 billion trees in the United States. Joe Biden, in this post-Trumpian moment in the United States, is bringing back the Civilian Conservation Corps to acknowledge that young people are in a jobs crisis, that people need to be outside doing healthy work together in a safer, distanced way. and that we desperately need to restore ecosystems, and that this is fundamental economic activity. So we're seeing a reemergence of some of this creativity and of the role of government and of the possibilities of responding post-pandemic to the climate crisis with a big change agenda that addresses all of the crises that we face, because we don't just face a climate crisis. We face multiple overlapping crises of water scarcity, extinction, and now the pandemic, not to mention the housing crisis. It is impossible for the next generation of young people to own a home for huge numbers of people. That's just wrong. And the housing bubbles, which are creating massive amounts of illusory wealth, that people who, like us, who got a chance to own a home early in an earlier economic cycle, suddenly have all this extra notional wealth, which, as you all know, is just really a license to increase your debt. It's not real money. You didn't do anything to double the value of your house. It just doubled in this Amsterdam tulip capitalist bubble frenzy that we've been living through. And what it's doing is it's increasing the generational divide and the generational tensions. That is a crisis when we have a whole generation of young people who cannot own a home. There's an inequality crisis. We've seen billions made by billionaires in the pandemic when most people are suffering harsh economic circumstances. And we have a crisis of white supremacy and racism. People are dying in the healthcare system because of racism. People are dying at the hands of law enforcement because of racism. And we are dealing with, and we are starting to see that people are dying of the pandemic because of racist structures in our economy. And that is a crisis that affects all of us. So we need solutions that solve multiple problems at the same time. And we need solutions that can be enacted at the scale and the speed, because we're out of time. So how do we win them? I'm staying at the high level here, and I've just got a few minutes of thoughts left. What we've seen, in my view, at the kind of intersection of journalism and activism and social movement storytelling that I've been doing for the last decade, we've seen social movements coming together across their divides and different issues. We've seen lots of white people coming out to Black Lives Matter demonstrations. We've seen Indigenous leaderships in pipeline protest movements with environmental groups under their leadership and direction. We have seen people come together across their differences to fight for change. And the movements, just like you've worked with many other groups to protect watersheds on the Sunshine Coast, are coming together. They're not just coming together, they're interfacing with the electoral system. I believe there's a new politics emerging. We're seeing it in the United States with figures like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the Squad, and we're seeing it here in Canada with a new generation of politicians who are coming out of activism and of social movements and environmentalism and racial justice movements, getting elected to office and staying connected to the movements that gave rise to them. So I believe we're seeing a new kind of politics. We're at the nexus, at the meeting point between social movements and the political system. And I think that's tremendously exciting. And I think that the pandemic has accelerated it. We found in the early days of the pandemic, among many other things that we learned, that we are connected, that what is happening to you is happening to me. And that was the flourishing of mutual aid that we saw, of neighbors coming to each other's rescue, of making sure that people had food, of making sure that seniors could go shopping or have food brought to them, of seeing who was in your neighborhood, who needed help, and who had help to give. And right now, in this moment, where one of the big news stories of the day is about the waiving of intellectual property rights for the production of vaccines globally, Canada shamefully is not taking a stand against the intellectual property rights trumping the production of vaccines in different places around the world. The United States, once again, is leading us, which is scandalous, by opposing what's called the TRIPS waiver, the waiver on intellectual property rights, by supporting it, a waiving of the TRIPS rules. We are living in a situation where countries like Canada are hoarding vaccines. Countries like India are collapsing under the weight of mass death. And some of our politicians still can't see that we're all connected. That herd immunity doesn't take place in Roberts Creek or Half Moon Bay or Gibsons or in the greater Metro Vancouver area. It takes place globally. And we will not be safe until everyone is safe. None of us will be safe until everyone is safe. And the pandemic is teaching us this as well. What else has it taught us? I believe these are hopeful lessons. The pandemic has reminded us who and what is essential. How many of us have given up so many of the things that we were doing, in particular buying stuff that we didn't really need and parking at our homes in a kind of a way station between a factory in China and the landfill? How much materialism has been shed away? Yes, there's been a lot of pandemic projects and Amazon boxes at doorways, but we have given up a lot of what we thought we needed. And we found that what we really need is food and family and care and shelter, the basics. What is essential? What do we need to live? We are so much closer to feeling that in our daily lives, in our skin. And that's something that the pandemic has told us. And who is essential? We have learned, we have seen the invisible workers of our system, the essential workers, some of the most marginalized and excluded in society, migrant farm workers who farm our food, Filipino migrant care workers in long-term care homes, warehouse workers and delivery drivers, grocery store workers. Those are the essential workers who are some of the least valued and least privileged in our society. And they are the ones who give us what we need to live. So we've actually seen in this pandemic that our yes solutions, our proposals have to be holistic and they have to benefit those folks, those essential workers, first and foremost. We have an opportunity to heal historic wrongs in the way that we come out of this pandemic. So we say at the Leap that we need an economy based on care and repair. Caring for the earth, what you folks do is green work. It's low carbon work. Defending the land is a green job. And it's when we talk about green jobs, and we need lots of green jobs, you always think, or we always see pictures of guys, and it's always guys in hard hats putting up wind turbines and solar panels. And we need lots of that. But green jobs are low carbon jobs, and they're all the essential jobs in our economy: farm work and food work, care work and healthcare, education. These are low carbon jobs, and so is land defense. So if we think about what we know now as we come out of the pandemic, the biggest lesson for me, and the one I'll end with, is that we know now that we can afford it. The government of Canada went from a deficit of $30 billion a year ago to a deficit that will approach $400 billion at the end of this year. And the sky didn't fall. Nobody parked a wheelbarrow full of toonies at an intersection in some Weimar Germany nightmare of hyperinflation, and walked away, leaving someone taking the wheelbarrow and leaving the money. You know what I mean? It didn't happen. All of the threats of what would happen if governments actually spent money, none of them happened. It turns out that in an emergency, a rich country like Canada has the resources to take care of everyone. I don't think they did it right. And I don't think that they will do it right. But I think that we learned that they can do it right. We have the resources to take care of the earth and each other. So that's where I'm at. I think we have this beautiful place where we live. We now have a huge struggle ahead of us coming out of the pandemic. And we know that we have enough resources to have housing for all, to have an economy based on care and repair, to make sure that everyone has the essential supports that they need to thrive. And I just want to thank you for the work that you do in bringing that about, the essential low carbon work that the SCCA is engaged in day out. And I just leave you with now, it is time to take the leap and get it done. And I'm excited to be in this work with you. Thank you.